Hello there, welcome back to the Codex. So, Oberon has finally entered the meta as a usable Warframe. They reworked him to be dramatically better than he used to be. Now, unfortunately, part of the reason why he's better than he used to be is because they essentially did the same thing as they did with Valkyr, where it's a health and armor-based frame, but he also has a invulnerability passive, which means that you can essentially make health and armor not matter, which seems kind of ironically weird on the health and armor buffing Warframe, but it does objectively make the frame a whole lot better to use. So let's go ahead and hop into that. I've got two main different builds to show you here. One is going to be more of like a level cap type of build, and one is going to be the health tank version of the build, the more normal version of the build that probably a lot of you will like to use. So first, let's go over the Archon Shards, which is going to be two Tau Forged Violet Archon Shards for the Equilibrium effect, which you could probably drop these because this build is, as you probably expected, using Universal Fallout, and that Arcane does generate so much energy that at least in high enemy density mission scenarios, you can probably get away without using this. So feel free to swap these out for something else like strength, duration, whatever you want to throw on. Parkour velocity, doesn't matter, up to you. He doesn't really need anything to any like massive degree. But right now I'm using two of these just to make sure that we have enough energy to spam. Then we're using two casting speed shards and one corrosive emerald shard, because you are often probably going to play Oberon as at least somewhat of a weapons platform, so this makes corrosive weapon builds a lot stronger. So let's go ahead and hop into the build here. Alright, future editing codex here. Due to a few changes that I've made and some polarity changes, some build differences, things like that, I'm actually going to show this version of the build first, the health tank version, as opposed to the other version that you'll see later for level cap and whatnot. So for the shards on this version of the build, it's also different. Right now I'm just running all strength. You could do different shards. You could even consider doing strength shards, unironically, and you'll see why that might actually be relevant in a moment here. It's also worth noting, one thing that I didn't think about at first, is that if you wanted to, you could also use topaz shards, especially ideally Tau Forged topaz shards, for the 15% ability damage on enemies affected by radiation status. You could use that to juice up Smite, to make Smite hit that one-shot kind of threshold more easily. A lot of people are running like 3 of these, for example, to make you very frequently one-shot with Smite. So that's a very fun build if you want to go around and be like a kind of a mage Oberon, just nuking guys down, just point at them and they explode, basically. Especially when it comes to Xmas enemies. If you target an Xmas enemy in a crowd, due to how the percentile health scaling works and them having more health, you will very often do enough damage to the Xmas that the AoE damage will also take out a bunch of regular enemies around it. So that is a consideration. Keep that in mind. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into the not regular version of the build here, but the version of the build that more of you might be interested in, as opposed to the level cap version. So this right here is not a health tanking Oberon, but instead a quick thinking energy tanking Oberon. Now, a lot of you are going to immediately rush to the comments and say this is copium. It's not. This would only be copium if I were to say that this is a good at level 10,000, which it's not. Like, I'll just be straight up. This is not Oberon health tanking or energy tanking. Is not good if you want to go to literal level cap. That is true. You would need the other version of the build that you'll see later to do something like that. But this is insanely comfortable for doing the kind of regular content that 99% of the player base actually does. And I have purposefully made this build have such overkill amounts of defense that it is just beyond comfortable to play. You barely have to think while you're playing this. If you are keeping your 1 and your 3 up, and your 1 in this case is Omamori, because I replaced Smite with Omamori. You don't have to. I just added Omamori as yet another layer of defense on this build to again make it super, super comfortable. Because I've noticed that a lot of people in my community, they like those kind of really like hands-off comfortable builds. So that's why I was targeting to do here. So, but if you want to keep Smite, go ahead and do that. Omamori just makes you super giga tanky. If you guys have seen my other videos, you know that I really like this ability. It's very passive. Yes, if you were to use Eclipse for damage reduction, it would be twice as strong as this because it's 75% DR instead of the 50% dodge chance that this has effectively. But this is just so passive. I really like it. But the core theme of this build is that instead of health tanking, we are energy tanking. And thanks to Arcane Battery and the amount of armor that you're able to get thanks to renewal, you can typically very easily have battery maxed out. So you will have over 1,000 energy. And then when you scale that up with the extra health that you get from renewal itself, along with health conversion and the DR from adaptation and the DR from
it's not actually DR, but the effective DR from Omamori and everything else, you are super extremely tanky. Health conversion is on this build because the universal orbs that universal Fallout spawns count as both health and energy orbs for the purposes of mods that, you know, trigger from those. Speaking of which, I can actually replace transient fortitude with energy conversion. So if you don't mind the trigger condition of this, you can get a little bit of duration back and use this because every single universal orb will count as both an energy orb for energy conversion and a health orb for health conversion. So health conversion, since it will be constantly stacked up all the way, essentially, as long as you keep proccing radiation, will constantly be giving you 1,350 extra armor. But since renewal, when you hit the cap 100% armor bonus, gives you 100% of your current armor as extra armor, this will actually give you 2,700 armor, because if it's giving you 1,350 and renewal basically copies your armor and gives it to you again, then that's another 1,350. So now this is giving you 2,700 armor in a single mod slot, which is clinically insane. And just to go ahead and do that math for you, that should mean that you have 5,600 armor in total between having 2,800 from health conversion and your regular armor, and then your regular armor and health conversion being given to you again by renewal. That's 5,600 armor. That is almost 95% damage reduction, because 5,700 armor is 95% damage reduction. And that's just from armor. So adaptation is another multiplicative up to 90%, and the Omamori acts as 50%. Again, it's not actually DR, it's redirection of damage, or ignoring damage, essentially. But with all that together, you are approaching getting up to effectively 99% plus DR, and that damage is mostly going to your energy. And when it does go to your health, we have Hunter Adrenaline on so that your health will give you energy back, which again will then start acting as health. It's just basically, with this constantly looping cycle of energy acting as health and health giving you energy, the only way that you go down is typically when you take so much damage that you get one shot, which requires an exorbitantly high amount of damage with the amount of EHP that this build provides. So let's go ahead and hop into a mission and showcase exactly that. Actually, one more quick note. I will say that if you want to go for the even more, you know, the build being super comfortable theme of this, you could replace the Speed Drift Appear or whatever Exodus you're running with Prime Surefooted, even though the second ability does make you status immune, if you want to also be knockdown immune, even when you're not on top of your hollow ground, just to make the build even more passively comfortable. Feel free to do that. People will laugh at you like, oh my, why are you running Prime Surefooted on Oberon? But ignore them, because the build is super comfy, so do whatever you want. Anyways, now let's go into the gameplay. Alright, so here we are on the mission. I'm going to go ahead and activate my renewal here. And again, just make sure that you keep your second ability down if you want to get those easy radiation procs along with your fourth. And you can see that we are extremely easily keeping our battery maxed out. Right now I have, again, that 5,600 armor, and your companions have even more armor, because I have a total of 5,600 armor, but since the renewal bonus is doubled for your allies, you're giving them an additional 5,600, because renewal is only giving me half of that, but it's twice as much for your teammates. So your teammates are real juiced up armor-wise. So if you do like playing this in a squad, they will appreciate that if they are any type of health tank frame. Or even if they're not a health tank, honestly, because it adds just so much armor that you basically force Warframes to act as health tanks. Let me actually just stand still for a moment here. And you'll see that well, it's very hard to die. Between the radiation procs making enemies fight each other, the fact that you are going to have a companion with you, presumably, that also pulls some aggro, and just how extremely tanky you are. Even if I don't keep picking up the orbs to get my health conversion trigger, just the tankiness without that is still hilariously absurd. You can see that base level steel path. The enemies have effectively zero chance of killing me. The only thing that might be able to kill me is if I stand in the full duration of a Jade Light, for example. But even like multiple bombard rockets, they don't seem to basically do anything. And again, right now, I don't even have health conversion stacked up, so I'm missing a huge amount of my tankiness. I'm missing like 2,700 armor right now, so if I go back to having that, I'm again going to be essentially an unkillable god on anything that is not absurdly high levels of content. Even if you take this to Elite Temporal Archimedia, which is effectively the highest normal level of content that most people actually do in the game, you will be, again, insanely tanky there. Now, some of the modifiers might mess with you, like the any modifiers that reduce your health or armor or things like that will, of course, make this less effective. But you have so much overhead on the amount of EHP that this build has that even if you were to cut it down by 75%, that still makes you effectively a god in most content. So again, super comfortable version of the build. This is what you'll probably see me run most of the time if I'm doing anything that's not like above level 5,000 probably. And one really fun thing to note is that, again, keep in mind, I'm not really killing any guys here because I'm just showcasing my survivability, so I'm running out of air, but keep in mind that since the way that the renewal works is that it basically takes however much armor you have and then doubles it. Just to put it simply, it gives you 100% of your current armor, even if it's temporary armor from any kind of ability buffs or whatnot, and it gives you that amount again. So if you somehow had 10k armor, it gives you another 10k armor, so you have 20k. And then that bonus is doubled for allies. But there's a really crazy combo you can do where if you play in a team with Chroma, and Chroma has Vex armor up, and especially in a Fisher mission, if you get corrupted and get like a crazy 2, 3, 4, or 5,000% Vex armor, if a Chroma is giving you like a 3,000% armor multiplier, which I actually tested out last night, you can get armor values of 20, 30, 50, 100,000 plus armor. I'm about to fail the mission here because, again, I'm just letting them attack me so you can see that I can't die, but it doesn't matter. Playing with a Chroma is insane because the amount of armor that Chroma gives you is then doubled by renewal and given to yourself and then doubled and given to everybody else. So yesterday I was giving my teammates in an experiment that we did 50,000 armor because we went to a Fisher with a Nidus and a Chroma, and the Nidus got corrupted, linked the Chroma, gave him insane amounts of power strength, and then gave us basically so much armor that we could probably have done level cap content with health taking. So keep that in mind if you like doing fun, team combinations like I enjoy doing. Now let's hop over to the more level cap appropriate version of the build that basically completely disregards health taking. So if you're interested in the level cap viable version of the build, something like this is what you might bring if you're going to go to like level 10,000 Cascade or super high level survivals or disruption or whatnot. If you want a version of Oberon that's able to survive not off of his health and armor, because at super high levels you're going to get one shot basically no matter how much damage reduction you have, but instead you're going to survive based off of his passive, then this is the build that I came up with. Now for some reason it says 40% strength, even though it's actually 10%. Let me see if I can get that to fix itself. There we go, because with power donation equipped it's actually 10% strength because we're using power donation and overextended for the extra range, which combined is minus 90% strength. So we have absolutely no strength there, so we're gonna get almost no health and almost no armor from renewal. But that doesn't matter if you're gonna be staying alive basically just from his passive, and you're still gonna get the benefits of the effects of radiation status on enemies from the second ability and the fourth ability, the confusion and the nullifying Xmas auras and whatnot. So you still are benefiting from his kit, but this is just a build that's changed in terms of survivability, shifting towards his passive. Now we are also running catalyzing shields, so that whenever you pop your 2 or your 4, for example, you're also going to benefit from a at least minor shield gate. And we're also using rolling guards, so that even if you do run into a period where, for example, say you're failing to pick up energy orbs in time, you can just initiate a roll, get 3 seconds of invulnerability, and then hopefully take out a few enemies in that time to start packing up your passive again. So that's why we have that on there. So we're just layering multiple layers of survivability. We're also using the Phoenix Renewal Aura, which gives us essentially one more way to ignore death. So if you go through all 3 of your righteous negation charges, then you could still have a Phoenix Renewal go off once every minute, which basically will act as a 4th negation charge, again, if you get into some hairy territory and are not able to keep up your picking up your orbs as much. We're also using Hallowed Eruption primarily because this gives the second ability, Hallowed Ground, 200% extra duration, so this lasts for an insanely long time. So if you're doing a sort of super high level survival, for example, and you're mostly just camping in one spot, you can pop this down in the location that you're camping around, and you will have a insanely long Hallowed Ground, which again is very useful because having the effect of that radiation on enemies will help your survivability as well. And it also is required to trigger your universal fallout. You need enemies to be irradiated, so it really feeds into that. So yeah, this is basically just entirely surviving off his passive and still utilizing his capabilities to proc radiation for fallout and whatnot. And we're still using battery on here, even though we're not going to get a lot of
We're not going to get as much energy from this as an actual armor stacking build, but it's still enough energy combined with his innate regen to allow us to drop flow and have that freed up mod slot. So I still decided to keep battery on this version of the build. Now let's go ahead and hop into a mission and showcase this version of it. So here is Oberon in action with 10% power strength. So we have effectively no heal and no extra armor. The only thing keeping us alive is the fact that we are constantly picking up health orbs or universal orbs, thanks to universal fallout, to trigger his invulnerability passive. And then of course we also have rolling guard that we can trigger, and catalyzing shields, giving us a nice on-command shield gate. And you are spamming abilities a good amount on Oberon, depending on how often you want to keep casting your Reckoning. You don't have to cast Hollow Ground too much on this version of the build, because since we're using the Hollow to augment, it does have a exorbitantly long duration of like 70 seconds, which combined with this absolutely enormous range it's amazing for just locking down a room with radiation procs to constantly keep your fallout going. As you can see, I can just keep running circles around this room, constantly picking up universal fallout orbs, getting infinite energy, infinitely stacking his passive. And yeah, you don't need any health and armor to stay alive in this build, which again, it's really funny that the health and armor buffing Warframe is actually able to just completely ignore health and armor and stay alive. Like in reality, this is potentially the best way to stay alive on him, not health and armor, especially if you want to go to level cap. This is primarily a build that you would take to something like actual level cap, like if you want to go to, you know, level 10,000 Cascade or something crazy. If you do want to do just regular levels, like the mission I'm in right now, you realistically don't need to do this. You can do a more passively comfortable, normal health tanking build, like if you want to go triple umbral and high strength and just chill with the very high health regen armor bonus. The enemies still won't be able to kill you in a context like this, but this build is how you would stay alive on level cap content or super high, you know, survival or disruption or whatever it is you want to take this to. As long as you have enough enemies to generate enough universal fallout orbs or actual health orbs with synth deconstruct and whatnot, you're good to go. I mean, you can't die even with the right now we have violence spawning in. Violence will nullify you, but the reason why Oberon is invulnerable is because of a passive effect, which he is not able to nullify. So even with violence here, I still can't die as long as you have orbs in the ground. And there goes violence, he's dead. So yeah, this is really funny to use. Works quite effectively, as you can see. All you have to do is keep your orb generation up, keep on killing stuff. Very good weapons platform. You can also, you know, you could throw on Smite Infusion, although you probably want to mod more strength if you're going to run Smite Infusion, since again, we do have 10% strength right now, so you would only get 10% radiation damage. Totally up to you. So you can let me know down below, what do you like? Do you like this build, or do you like the normal health tanking build better? Totally up to you which one you want to use. They're both fantastic, and Oberon is a much better frame now than he used to be. So you might see me actually use him on streams now in the future, now that he's not arguably one of the worst frames in the game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was informative, entertaining, and whatnot, and I will see you guys in the next one.